Entrepreneurship is a mindset, and on the Entrepreneur's Blueprint, we'll be dissecting this mindset, the successes, the struggles, and even the failures of entrepreneurs to help with your own entrepreneurial journey. I'm your host, Justin Castelli, and I'm the founder of RLS Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor in Fishers, Indiana. In some of these episodes, we'll cover various financial planning, investment, and business planning topics. This information should be considered educational and not considered advice or a recommendation. You should consult your financial advisor or tax professional regarding your personal situation. And now that that's out of the way, let's get to the latest episode of the Entrepreneur's Blueprint. Hey there, I'm Justin Castelli, the host of the Entrepreneur's Blueprint podcast. And I want to welcome you to the very first video podcast episode. This will actually be the second or third episode when iTunes rolls out in the next week. But Dasarte Yarnway is a very good friend of mine. He joined me today for a conversation about hip hop and its influence on entrepreneurship, and also a tribute to one of our favorite rappers, Nipsey Hussle. And as I mentioned, we just got done. It is so good. I can't wait to get everything uploaded into iTunes and put it out next week, that I wanted to at least release the video to you today. So this is going to be the first podcast episode that's going to be on video. My hope is to continue doing this going forward so you can also listen and see the entrepreneurs I'm going to have on the show. Cool thing that Dasarte and I are doing, we're actually co-branding this. So you're going to see his brand, his podcast, the Young Money Podcast. We're going to run it on his podcast. We're going to run it on the Entrepreneur's Blueprint podcast as well, to try to reach as many people as possible. In an age where a lot of us might view each other as competitors, Dasarte and I are not that way at all. We're both financial advisors. We have our own firms. We're entrepreneurs at heart, and we want to put this content out to help other entrepreneurs find their way along with their journey. So I'm really excited about the first of, that I know of, a co-branding of a podcast and video between two separate brands to put the information out there. So with that, let me shut up, let you get to the video. Enjoy my conversation with Dasarte Yarnway about hip-hop's influence on entrepreneurship and a tribute to one of our favorite rappers, Nipsey Hussle. I hope you enjoy. So when did you remember first getting into hip-hop?
It's crazy because I went to this after-school program called John McLaren, right? And we had this group, and they would do talent shows on a semi-annual basis, right? And it was three guys. It was Dasarte, Dexter, I think the other dude's name was, and DeAndre. We called ourselves the 3Ds.
I knew you were going to say that before you even told me 3Ds. I was thinking about it. I was counting them.
It was like the Ed, and Eddie, right? But it was the 3Ds. Now, we went and we used to like listen to all these rap songs in the yard, and we would try to practice our steps and then perform at the talent shows. It was so I was so in love with hip hop at the time. I used to write my name on my school papers, Dasarte Mace Yarnway. That was the era of Bad Boy, right? When yes. Diddy, Mace, all those guys are really hot. And I think that was when I knew that hip hop had an influence in my life.
So I'm going to date myself because I'm older than you. And I wouldn't even really call it hip hop, but it would be considered hip hop. The first tape I had in my intro to hip hop was MC Hammer.
There you go. Oakland's very own.
Yes. So the very stereotypical introduction to rap for a white person in Midwest America would be MC Hammer. And at the time, I was probably in first, second grade. I was going to a Catholic school, and I remember me and my friends, we would listen to the tape. So that was my introduction. And from there, I was always hooked. But I actually think that my attraction to hip hop started when I was younger. Like I remember my parents, on Saturdays putting the record player on, and we would listen to like Michael Jackson, or my dad was real big into Motown. So I think that sound carried over. And then as soon as I heard like the beats and the music, that is what grabbed me. And maybe it's because of that listening to it when I was younger. But I've really grown up listening to everything, but it always comes back to hip hop. And something you and I both share, we're both athletes. One of us, more successful than the other, that being you. But hip hop was always real big for me when it came to getting ready for games or practice. Right. So was that the same case for you?
It was. When you think about athletics, hip hop and athletics go kind of hand in hand, right? All the advertisements that you see on TV, the NBA playoffs right now is streaming all of Nipsey stuff, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I think they kind of go hand in hand. More than anything, I think that everyone can grab a piece of a hip hop artist's story and try to apply that to their life. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it, right? Then you have the percussions that kind of get you in the mood. So yeah, as an athlete, that's all I listen to. I have my favorites on game day. And it just, the music is timeless if you find a good artist, right? Like I can listen to some people over and over and over and over again, and I think that's what I love about it.
Well, you hit the nail on the head for me, at least, when you talked about like the lyrics.
Yeah.
I'm not a lyrical person myself, but I
Mhm.
appreciate, and when I listen to songs, I listen for words to try to extract something. And way back when we actually used to buy CDs, like I would get to the
I
car
remember
and
those
before I
days.
even left, I would rip the wrapping off, and the first
Mhm.
thing I would do would pull out the booklet that came with it. And
Yeah.
first thing I would do is always look at who produced it.
Mhm.
And then I would start looking through the words. And the funny thing is, I remember there's a Jay-Z song, and he mentions like, "This is for those that open up the booklet and look at or open up the CD and look at the
Right.
booklet first." I was like, "That's me, that's me." Jay-Z's talking to
Right.
me. But for me, the initial is just the beats and kind of picking my spirits up and getting ready to go to battle on the court. But
Right.
then I do typically find songs that I pull from the lyrics to try to pump me up. And I do that to this day. Like driving into the office, I don't really listen to podcasts. I listen to music. I listen to
Yeah.
rap to get me ready
Yeah.
for the day. And then podcasts get filled in on the way home and in different times. So
Right.
I share the same sentiment when it comes to hip hop. And, for us, it used to be, go ahead.
No, it's funny that you say that because I listen to the words, right? And I
Mhm,
think that's
mhm,
just been a part of my like history. So my mom used to work graveyard shifts, right? So she would always be like away while I was up, right? So how I would communicate with her at the time, I would just write down my little message like, "Hey, school was hard today," or whatever the case was, right? And of course now I write books, right? So it's kind of
mhm,
always followed me. So as I listen to the hip hop songs, these artists, I would like, what is he saying, right? Does this
mhm,
make sense? Does it apply to me? Oh, this is my reality, right?
mhm.
And I found power in those words. So I even see that with the artists that I like today. You talked about Jay-Z, we talk about Nipsey, we talk about these artists that have stories and kind of paint a picture for you. I think that sticks with me first, and then the music comes later.
And I think that's why I'll never get into the mumble rappers. They don't tell a
Never.
story. They don't tell a story. There's that, what's the new artist out of Atlanta? Is it Baby or something? Baby to Baby or something like that?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know our friend Tyrone loves him. He's like hyping him up. I
yeah,
tried to give him a listen and I can't. No, I mean, no disrespect, and that always is disrespectful, but I just
yeah,
can't. The ability to tell a story and intertwine the words and have it rhyme the way that they do, to me, is just so impressive. But to rhyme car with bar and
yeah.
or car with car is not impressive to me. Um,
And I think that's the difference between a rapper and a musician or an
mhm,
artist, right?
mhm,
Right? Because one has a craft, one has a story, one is trying to paint a narrative for the listener, right? Just like you and I would do on a podcast or speaking at an event, right? But the other is just trying to make things match, right? It's
right.
like, hey, this piece fits here. I'm going to put it together. I have respect for that. I think that's more of a revenue thing, like I'm trying to get some money or whatever.
Oh
But
yeah.
the others have been doing this and have been refining this craft for a very long time. And you can tell when you look at the body of work, and that's what I really like.
So before we get to hip hop and business, who is doing the best job of that today for the
Hip hop and
craft?
business. All right, so I will give you an
No,
example,
no, no,
right?
no. No, before we get to that, who is the best artist today doing their craft? Who's the best at the craft today?
Oh, the best artist today. Wow.
I think it's obvious
Um,
and hands down, but we'll see what you say.
what do you think? I mean, that's hard for me because I listen to a lot of music.
K Dot all the way, Kendrick,
K
and
Dot.
then I think J Cole is a very close second.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Logic fan as well, which I'm wearing a Logic shirt
There you
on this
go.
podcast.
I
I,
like
I
that.
like those three and the way they tell the stories. But I think Kendrick is a little bit above in his storytelling.
Yeah, I like Kendrick a lot. I like J. Cole a lot. 2014 Forest Hills Drive was one of my favorite albums.
Hmm.
And it came at a timely period in my life. So I
Hmm.
would agree with that in terms of craft. And the reason I say that is because whether it's business or rap or whatever the case is, and we'll get into that, it's important for you to know what your identity is, right? You and I talk about it all the time on our mentor calls, just saying, hey, I'm not the type of guy that's going to go cold call or do this or do that. I'm going to build my business this way. And I think that
Hmm.
knowing who you are, knowing your identity is important in honing in on your craft. Because if you don't know that, what are you really trying to refine, right? And I think
Right.
that Kendrick has that down. J. Cole, he has that down. And obviously it's working for him.
All right, so let's transition to hip hop and business. So we were hip hop and athletes
Hmm.
growing up.
Yep.
We've both have matured, and yet somehow we remained in the hip hop game and really liking it. How do you see hip hop influencing the business world. And then we're going to get to kind of lessons that we can actually take, and specifically from Nipsey Hussle, because we're both big fans and everybody knows the story of what happens to Nipsey. So what kind of talk about your view of hip hop and its influence on business and entrepreneurship?
I follow business hip hop artists, right? So these people aren't just artists, but they're businesses. And I think the first lesson from some of these guys is just committing to a process, right? So when I look at Jay-Z making his first album I think he was 27 at the time when he started Rockefeller with Dame Dash, right? And it took him years for that record label to mature and years for him to spin off different businesses from that initial like risk that he took. That's a process. And a lot of the times in this age of instant gratification, in this age of like, I want everything now, we don't understand that things take time. I think that the generation before us knew that. Some of our parents worked at the same place for like 30 years, right? They were saving up for their pension, whatever the case is. They knew that everything was a process. And I think that if you look at some of these artists, you can see that it didn't happen overnight for them. So I think that's number one. And then number two, I think that it's monetizing on your brand. I think the best artists know how to do that and have this kind of enterprise mentality on how to monetize every angle of their brand, right? I remember watching an interview and Nipsey was like, well, Jay-Z decided to go after alcohol first, and then he started clothes, and then he did this, right? And I think that it's important to really leverage the things that you're doing and kind of build a brand off that. So that's number two. And then I'm a big fan of like royalty structures, right? Because I write books and because I've been in that kind of world, right? And I just remember how it felt to see like how much they paid me for an advance and how much they made in 1 month, like 10 times what they paid me for an advance. So you see a lot of these smart guys really knowing their worth, owning their publishing, owning their masters, right? And are able to really capitalize on that, not just for today, but over the long term. I think that Jay-Z did a great job with that by buying his masters back. Nipsey, at the time of his death, it was announced that he owned all of his publishings and royalties, and his album Victory Lap went up to number 2 on the Billboard 100 after he died, right? So imagine what that looks like for his beneficiaries, right? I just think there's so many smart dudes that have this capability to kind of like really know what they're doing in business.
Well, Jay-Z said it best. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business man. So, and I by far not the first person to quote Jay-Z saying that, but it's so true. I would second all of the reasons that you talked about. You and I were talking offline before we got started. I also think that embedded in the music, if you're going to listen to the lyrics, that there are lessons that are given throughout the music. And we're going to talk about Nipsey, and he talked a lot about it because he was using his music to educate his community and help them understand owning and all the things that go along with that. But and we also talked about this online, like there is a life that I don't understand because I didn't live it that comes through from a lot of hip hop artists. Yeah. And we keep talking about Jay-Z, not to bring him and make the episode about him, but early on his business was selling drugs. Right. And his first couple albums, he talked about how he did that, how he survived, and how he's able to take that business and then parlay it into everything that he did. And while it's not glamorous, there are principles that a drug dealer in running his business, they run a legit business. They have product, they have inventory, they have people that are selling it. They have to go collect. Like to run a drug business, you have to be a successful business person. Now, it's not legal and you don't want to stay there, but if you can take those principles and apply them to something that is on the legit side of the business world, you can learn a lot from what those guys were doing earlier in their days.
When I was growing up, that was my environment, right? So I remember like literally in the neighborhood that my mother still lives in, like us eating dinner, gunshots, ducking, and like getting back up to like eat again. Like it was like normal, right? I would play outside and those same drug dealers would be like, hey, go inside. You know what I mean? You're going to go to college. You're going to play football, whatever the case is. But I saw, kind of in the background, them running an operation, right? And I always thought to myself as a kid, like, hey, if I could do this legally or run a business legally, I think that I have an opportunity to really help my family. So when I was in 3rd grade, I like sold pencils at school. I would go to Walgreens and get like a pack of 20 and sell them for like 25 cents each just to go to the neighborhood donut shop and like get me sweets that my mom wouldn't buy me, right? So I think that you're right. They're not positive examples. It's not my wish that anybody starts there, but I think that you can learn lessons from, the organization or the business that they were in.
Yeah, don't necessarily follow the path that they took,
Yeah.
but take the lessons from that. And that's why and honestly, I believe that's why they're sharing it. I think part of the sharing of those principles is to kind of build their backstory and kind of
Hmm.
create their brand. But I do think that those artists are kind of learn from me and don't make the same mistakes. Like the
Right.
guys in your neighborhood were like, "Hey, you're not following my path. Don't follow my mistakes. You get out and go do bigger and help other people."
Right.
And for me, another area that hip hop influences business, at least for me, is just hustle has become a word that is overused and
Hmm.
grind, but there is some truth to that, and there
Right.
is a need to be able to hustle and see opportunities and make sacrifices, and there's a lot of that comes through on in the business world that comes through from hip hop, and then there's also a lot of confidence in hip
Hmm.
hop. A lot of artists, they're not talking about. There are some kind of emo rappers out there, but a lot of
There are.
the main rappers are very confident and they have this presence. And while I don't think you should be an arrogant jerk, I do think if you're going to be a successful business person and entrepreneur, you need to have that self-confidence.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I kind of pull from that, and I interject their confidence and put it in me. And I don't know why I've done that or how exactly it goes about, but I know that some of my self-confidence comes from years of listening to artists talk about positive things in their life and
Hmm.
their bigger confidence. So I think that comes through as well.
Well, the thing you have to understand is that when you're doing something, especially, I think all artists have a bit of, entrepreneurship in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't believe that your product is good, why should anybody else? And I think
Mm-hmm.
as a rapper, you have to exude that. Like, this is good. It could be the
Mm-hmm.
worst thing in the world, but I'm going to tell you that it's good. I believe in this product, and hopefully people will too. I remember like years ago when I first jumped in the financial advising game, I was just nervous about this. I was like, hey, I don't know, like maybe this person thinks I'm too young or, not professional or what the case is. And when I started to be confident in what I did, people
Mm-hmm.
started to believe in me more. And I think that's what these artists are exuding in their music, in their struggle and their process.
So a question for you that I didn't send on the outline beforehand, but I think you'll be able
Mhm.
to handle it on the fly.
For sure.
Um, One of the things in a video that you sent me, Nipsey was talking, and he talked about how, like, when hip hop embraces something, whatever it
Hmm.
might be, that once that they give it its blessing, it kind of blows up,
Yeah.
mainstream, like across the
Hmm.
board. So he highlighted, Jay-Z's alcohol and Diddy's alcohol,
Hmm.
and he was trying to go towards tech. My question is, what is it about hip hop? Do you think that once it embraces something, it makes it cool across the mainstream?
Um, that's a great question. I think that economically speaking, there's a lot of dollars that people are
Mm-hmm.
spending in hip hop. So, like for example, clothing, for example, right? Like a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
will put money towards certain clothes and certain styles and really make it really fashionable. So, like when that happens, um, it's like a trend. It's like any other trend. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one thing, and I think hip hop has a good eye for value, really. Um, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing as well. So we can see kind of what the next thing is, what the cool thing is, and what people will appreciate. It's art. And at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, I think a lot of hip hop artists have a great eye for just any type of art, whether that's fashion, whether that's Jay-Z's getting into actual art, like framed art and
Mm-hmm.
canvas art and pieces like that. Um, Travel has been a big thing in the hip hop community lately where people are like gathering in groups and going overseas. I just think that we have a good eye for that.
Well, I think that another way to look at it, especially tying to entrepreneurship, is I think an entrepreneur and the people I think who are going to be listening to my podcast and
Hmm.
this conversation, they're forward thinking. They're one step ahead of, not if not two steps
Yeah.
ahead of everybody, which is why I think hip hop lines up so much with entrepreneurship because, to your point, they're looking ahead of the game, not
Yeah.
in reverse, and everybody's trying to play catch up. So you look
Hmm.
at if you look at pop, it
Hmm.
has a hip hop influence in it now. Country, Billy Ray Cyrus has a freaking rap song
Old
out now.
Town Road.
Yes. Oh, my boys stayed at my in-laws or
Hmm.
my sister-in-law's house, and her kids listen to it, and that's all that's on repeat at our
Nice,
house.
nice.
But now country is trying to pull
Hmm.
from that hip hop influence. And I mean, I'm not from the hip hop community. I love the hip hop community, but I'm not in it.
Hmm.
But I view that as a compliment. That what is being done there, that other areas that usually, I mean, if we think about country music and historically, like it would be anti hip hop, and now all of a
Completely.
sudden there's a crossover, and you got Billy Ray Cyrus going that direction. Like
Hmm.
I think that's pretty cool, but I think it's all about the forward thinking, ahead of the curve, and that's why I think hip hop and entrepreneurship are so close together, and kind of move in step.
And I think that's
Um,
kind of embedded in the hip hop story, right? Because
mhm,
for a time period, like if you look at the origins of hip hop, these dudes were marginalized, right? They were talking about their struggle and the things that were going on in their neighborhoods, right? So you always had to kind of look forward for better days, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now you're seeing that just we've been here before. You're just seeing it
Mm-hmm.
in a new light. Now we're looking at the next hot thing, the next new fashion trend, or the next wave of collaboration, which is the country thing that's going on. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about Nipsey Hussle, because you and I are both big Nipsey Hussle fans.
Absolutely.
And when he was shot on that Sunday, as soon as I saw that come across on Twitter, I immediately texted you,
Yeah.
because I know that as big of a fan as I am of him, you're 10 times that. But as we've talked about since he passed, there's been a lot of lessons specifically from his hip hop and what he's doing as a businessman that thankfully are finally coming out. Like if you look at the tribute pieces and the pieces that have been written after he's passed, they've been talking about all of the good that he's done in his community.
For sure.
And I really wanted to highlight that as a bit of a takeaway for listeners for their businesses and entrepreneurship, but also kind of as a tribute to him and kind of to add one more good positive thing about what he was doing when he passed away. So but let's just dive into lessons that you have taken specifically for your business and what you do from Nipsey Hussle, and then I'll add mine afterwards.
Lessons that I've learned from Nipsey Hussle. Number one is just own your mind and mind your own, and I think that was huge for Nipsey. And when he says own your mind, he was a free thinker. One of my favorite quotes by Nipsey he says, meditate on what it is that you want to be, right? And then stand on that. Be unwavering about that thing. That means like, I'm putting my mind to this thing and I'm going to work at that thing until the universe stands aside to let me pass. And then when he says mind your own, he's like, commit to the people, places, and things that you're going to give back to. And I think that's awesome, right? I think that's number one. And I think that's what I want to do with my own entrepreneurship journey is like, I've committed to doing something. I'm going to do that. And my community is going to reap the benefits and dividends from that commitment, right? I think that's number one. Number two is just the mailbox money mentality, which is what I really, really love. As an entrepreneur, sometimes you're working to work smarter, not harder. In the beginning years, it's a lot of hard work. Your foot is on the ground. You're running that Tyrone Ross 100-meter dash, right? And it just seems like it's a lot of work. But you shouldn't have to do that work for 50 years. And I think that's what Nipsey was gearing up for. He's saying, hey, I'm going to park my money here, invest in these things. So eventually the checks come in the mail, right? The residual income is coming and it's less work and more reward. So I think that's number two. I can go on and on about this.
No, keep going.
I think number three is really owning your craft. Nipsey has owning your craft and owning your message at that. Because Nipsey, since his first thing, I don't even know what it's called, Slauson Boy 1, and that was back in 2008, right? Has been saying the same thing. Like, I want my guys to invest, buy real estate. This process is hard. I come from this place, so he never neglected, where he's from and, his associations. But he's always been like, hey, this is my craft. This is the story I'm going to tell. And I'm going to just repeat that story for the rest of my life, right? And I think he had, I don't know, it just felt like if he changed one life, he did his job, right? Through listening to his music. So owning his craft and then owning his message is huge. And the business side about owning your craft is just the royalty structure to me. I mean, Nipsey owned all his work. And if you listen to his interviews, he had a bunch of opportunities to sign a record deal that would have given him a big signing bonus or whatever they call it, right? Advance. And he said no, because he wanted to own that. So I think last year before Victory Lap came out, he got a deal with Epic and they were like, you can own all of your royalties. We just want the marketing cut. And I think that was huge. What else can I say about this dude? And then giving back to your community, right? Crenshaw and Slauson notoriously is a horrible place, right? It was a bad place back in the day. In the 60s, that's when the whole gang thing started, right? You had Stanley Tookie Williams that created the Crips, which was actually a community protection organization in its beginnings. And then you had the Bloods that were the same thing, called themselves brothers, right? To see him see that, right? See the violence, see the crime, see the things that were happening, but saw the potential way before anybody else did was definitely before his time, right? And I think that he knew that. He was committed to that, and he gave back in ways that we can never imagine. So you think about Vector 90, his co-working space. that he created to help bridge the gap between the inner cities and Silicon Valley where I live. You talk about his clothing store and buying that lot where he used to sell CDs and kind of do dirt at, right? That's an economic move, and PP gave people opportunity to open their stores on that shop. You think about community development and fixing playgrounds at schools, right? And giving back and having turkey drives and all this stuff. And you just think about his inner circle, his tribe that he gave jobs to, felons that were forgotten about, right? And not given a chance. And when you think about that, it's like, you really are a model. Nipsey was really a model for everybody, no matter what economic background, no matter what race, creed, sexual orientation, on how servant leadership is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we're in a position with our businesses that we could really take that model and implement it in what we do. Because, you know, Nipsey, you said if he was able to impact one life, like that was a success. And I know he impacted way more, but you and I are impacting multiple lives all the time with what we do. And we also have the opportunity to give back to our communities and help those people who maybe don't qualify to hire us, but give them the attention and help that they need to start moving forward, to maybe one day be in a position to come back and knock on our door and say, hey, now I'm ready for real help. And now I can pay you for your services. Like, we have that opportunity to give back to our community. So I think that's huge. I think one of the things that I really appreciated, and it's something you've already touched on, but a different way to talk about it, is because he wanted to stay independent and he didn't want anybody controlling him and telling him what he could and couldn't do. You know, he gave up the opportunity to blow up. Like, he could have been huge years ago. And what I want entrepreneurs and business owners to realize is you can be tremendously successful financially and just in the bigger picture of life without being big. I think sometimes that when somebody sets out to form their business, they want to be the next Amazon or the next Apple. And while there's nothing wrong with setting those high, ambitious goals, you can still be successful, leave an impact, have a good life, and not be that big. You know, Nipsey could have been on the level of Jay-Z and Diddy and all those guys that have multiple businesses and are businessmen, but he chose to stay local and do it his own way. And I think that's something that I want entrepreneurs to think about and realize, that you don't have to go big. There's a book, I forget what it's called, I'll link to it. So it's basically about small businesses that have stayed very successful because they stayed small, and don't always have to be that big business. And that's something that I've discovered on my personal journey. Like, I've been a few different avenues on what I want to do with my firm, and I've scaled it back. Is that, if I get big, that's great. You know, Nipsey signed with Epic. He had a Grammy nomination this year. He was getting to that level, and maybe one day he was at that status on his own terms. If I get to that status of the bigger national firms on my own terms, great. But if I don't, and I stay smaller, and it allows me to do other things that I think will feed into my business that I enjoy, I'd rather stay smaller and successful and stay local, kind of like Nipsey was doing. So that's the big thing I was going to add on to what you've already said, because I had those down as well.
It's incredible, because I listen to Nipsey like every day, right? It just gets me hyped up, and it helps me to, you know, really process the journey that I'm on. So yesterday I'm listening to Nipsey, one of his, I don't know what album this was on, but maybe The Marathon. He's like, I'm the best in LA, South Central LA. And when I heard that, I thought about just where I've been, right? So I played college football, and I remember UC Berkeley being very big, right? I was like, I have to make this small. Now I'm like, all I have to do is really own this community here, right? Build a community here, and I will be just fine. Now, like you, if it happens and I'm super successful, great. But if it doesn't, I have my community here, and it'll be awesome. I was watching CNBC today. They were like, yo, Pinterest just IPO'd. They don't need to go after Facebook. They really have a committed community of people that use this app. And if they just focus on that, I think that they can have extreme revenue growth and profit in the next couple of years. And I believe that. Why stress yourself and give you this heartache when you already have people that love you, advocate for you, and will do business for you based on who you are and where you are? And I think Nipsey understood that, and it's a lesson for all of us entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, take care of your fans and take care of your clients. And if you're doing the right things, I have no study to support this. I have no concrete evidence to give you and listeners, but I operate under the mindset that if you do things the right way for the right reasons, everything will take care of itself. the income will come, the business will grow, new clients will come in from areas you didn't know. And it's almost like the universe repaying you for the good things you did years ago.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds very utopian, and there are plenty of people that are business owners that have struggled or have failed, and they did do things the right way, and they did do things for the right reason, and it didn't work out that way. And to those people, I would say your journey's not finished. Like, that's a part of the story. And as frustrating as it is, that's just leading you to the right business for you to be doing all of the right things. And one day it'll come. And there's people probably cursing me out for saying that, but I believe that with everything inside of me. And that's the way I've always taken like my business and my career, and knock on wood, it's worked and it continues to. So focus on those that love you the most and are taking the most care of you. Do things for the right reasons. And I think you'll have success, not without struggles, but success will come.
Absolutely. And I think that that's important because there's no right way, right? As a business owner, I think it's important to find what your right way is. Now, of course, you got to be ethical, legal, and compliant with whatever business that you do. But I think it's important for people to just understand that this way might not be my way. And I need to find my right way, commit to that, and really just go at that until exhaustion. And I think that's a huge key for any entrepreneur in any industry.
And I think by doing it your way, that's the right way for you, you will attract people that's the right way for them.
Exactly.
So now you're building this business, whatever it might be. Like, I talk to advisors about this, but whatever the business is, then you're going to be attracting people who are the right types of clients, the right type of customers. And you don't have to worry about headaches because they know everything about you. They know who you are. They already agree with your way of doing things. So now it's more of, are they a good fit for me if it's a client situation, or taking good care of them so they become repeat customers if your business happens to be something, retail oriented or something like that. So the other thing I had about Nipsey that I wanted to touch base on slipped my mind, so I'll come back to it. Let's keep going. So any other major principles about, business that kind of comes from Nipsey that you really take to heart and that you think entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Absolutely. I think that with Nipsey, we saw all the good things that he was doing for his community. He had lessons for entrepreneurs, but I think it's important to note everything that he was doing personally as well. Now, you're a business owner. I'm a business owner. I bootstrap my business, right? And you can get lost in the shuffle because you're so focused on your business's success and growth. We all know the stats. 1 out of every, I don't know how many businesses will or fail. Like, a lot of businesses fail within the first year, and a lot of them don't make it to 3 years. But in spite of that, Nipsey still took care of his personal life. It just came out that he had trust accounts open for all of his kids, right? He had $1 million life insurance policy on himself, maybe multiple policies. He owned all of the publishing and royalties, as I stated before, right? He had real estate holdings in Atlanta, in South Central LA, in different parts of the country. So although he was focused on the business, the legacy, the plan, the music, and the craft, he never let his personal finances and wellness fall by the wayside. So as an entrepreneur, how do you balance both? Of course, there's going to be times where, you give way to one or the other, right? But I think that he was just a prime example of balance. And that's something that I'm trying to hone back into this year. Like, hey, you've worked really hard. You've sacrificed a lot, right, as an entrepreneur. But it's important to have balance. And that doesn't only include finances, personal finances, but wellness as well. Going to the gym, eating right, drinking water, stretching, all of those things are important. And I think when I look at Nipsey's life, he made sure to have that proper balance.
I'm so glad you brought up the maturity that he exhibited when it came to his finances and financial picture. Because on the other end of the spectrum, you have Aretha Franklin, who, if we're going to stereotype, if we're human beings, we stereotype, we make judgments initially. You would think that she would have all of her stuff in order, and she had an $80 million estate with no will and last testament. And then you have Nipsey on the other hand, which you would think that he's all in the business and the hustle and the grind. He's not thinking about those types of things. He's young, he's invincible, but he had all that stuff lined up. So you can still be cool and have this great image and be responsible in the background, making sure you're taking care of all the most important things. And not even with business owners, that is something that I'm sure you can attest to. Young people neglect, even if they're not business owners. Young couples, W-2, working for big corporations, don't have a will, don't have life insurance, don't have an emergency fund, but are doing all these other things. So I think that is a great piece of information to take from Nipsey that I didn't even think of. The one that I did think of, I want to come back to before it forgets again, because you're just blowing my mind with what you're coming up with. It's on the back to the own your own. And I look at the way you and I have hustled and sacrificed, as you said, to create our own firms. And we're kind of at that stage where we're past those struggle years and we're establishing ourselves and we're growing, but we own everything. We own our business. So we have nobody to answer to, which allows us to do podcasts like this. But if we worked for a bigger corporation, this would never happen. Definitely. We own our content. So for you own the books, you're getting revenue from that. You own the podcast that you do. I own my blogs. I own my videos. Down the road, I have no idea what that leads to, but it gives me more options and more flexibility and more leverage. My friend, or our friend, Tyrone Ross always talks about leverage and how valuable that is. True. It gives us more leverage. And not that there's anything wrong had one of us decided to merge with another big firm. But then by doing that, we give that up. And I think that the entrepreneurial spirit that you and I share doesn't allow us to do something like that, at least not this year or not this early in our careers, because we have so much more to build that will be a bigger benefit to us, that maybe one day it does make sense. And then when you go to that table, that's like Nipsey going to Epic, that he went on his term. He still owned his masters. He didn't have to give all those rights up. They wanted him so bad because of everything that he was doing. Just them being associated with him was good for their business and good for their brand.
Yep, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more.
So I think that as you're going down your entrepreneurial journey, that whenever possible, maintain as much control of your business as possible so you can do things on your own terms. I love Shark Tank, and you can always see that the sharks are always going to try to get that majority control or gain more ownership so they can input their say. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's warranted, but sometimes that takes away the creativity behind the business that took it to that level. So just, I would say, be careful when you're thinking of trying to reach that next level and giving up ownership, and what does that mean to what you're able to do and your bigger purpose behind your why.
For sure.
So, favorite Nipsey song?
Favorite Nipsey song?
I'll give you two, because I have two.
Please, go ahead. Favorite Nipsey song for me, I'll take one off of the most recent album. I really love Victory Lap.
Okay.
I really love the intro song. And I remember him telling listeners on the Breakfast Club interview that he wanted it to be theatric. And he gets on the song and he just has affirmation as his first bar on the song. And he goes on, he says, "I'm prolific, so gifted. I'm the type that's going to go get it." And like, I could have not listened. I could have turned the album off at that point. But I think that song and that line alone really exudes really is like what we should feel about ourselves as entrepreneurs. You are prolific, you are gifted, go get it. Right. And I think that, I mean, that's a word that we should all try to take and remember every day. On your journey, I'm sure you've had hard times. I'm sure it hasn't been easy to get to the point that you are. And I think that I'll tell myself that when those days come. Right. So I really love that. What else can I say? I love every Nipsey song, man. I love every Nipsey song, but that's the one that sticks out to me the most.
So my two are also from Victory Lap. Okay. And I feel kind of guilty choosing the most recent album, but that's the one that I've listened to the most over the last year and a half since it came out. But mine, I love Grinding All My Life.
There you go.
And grinding is very similar to hustle. It's a word that's used too much. Gary Vee loves that. And it kind of, I feel like it's disingenuous sometimes when people say that, but there is a grind to growing a business and doing the things that we do. And like, there are a lot of things that I do right now. It's me and one other person at my firm, which means I'm doing everything from the financial advisor standpoint, from the business owner standpoint. I'm doing all of my content. I'm stupid and I edit everything. Like, it is a grind and I am hustling, and I just love that song. And it all has a real good beat that kind of picks me up. So I almost start every drive to the office with that song. The other one that has really grown on me lately is Right Hand to God.
Oh man, I love that song.
It's another song that I think initially what made me really like it is the musical aspect of it, and then start listening to the words, and I love it. And I don't know if it's a horn that's in there, but there's something that is kind of horn sounding that then takes me back to one of my favorite Outkast songs from, I think it was Aquemini maybe, that has the horns in it as well. So those are my two favorite. I pride myself that I've been listening to Nipsey since about late 2009, 2010, because I went back to my iTunes to find out when I downloaded the first albums. And I'll be honest, like I'm a big Nipsey fan, but it's kind of gone in a wave. Like I listen to him a lot, and growing up, I always favored West Coast over East Coast. I listened to everything, but I really was Dre and Snoop and Tupac, and I listened to Biggie and Jay-Z, but I would listen to more of that. And I think it was kind of more that sound was more in line to get me ready to play ball than an East Coast sound.
Right.
And then, so I listened to him early on when I first found him and kind of fell off a little bit and still would hear some things. And then I would say as this business began to grow and the entrepreneur in me began to blossom, because I wasn't always that way. I wasn't selling pencils in elementary school. I remember the kids who were.
Yeah.
I wish I was, but that wasn't me. But as this journey has really picked up for me, I stumbled back on him. And I think it was just like stuff would show up in YouTube and I'd listen to it and I'd go into what he was talking about. And then hearing the businessman is what really brought me back in. And then Victory Lap came out and I was like, bam, like I'm back in on Nipsey.
Yeah.
So how did you find Nipsey? I mean, I know you're West Coast and in that.
Yeah, I think my cousins really loved Nipsey, right? They loved his message. And it's crazy because I would have different people in my life like Nipsey for different reasons, right? So you have people, and this is the mark of a true artist, a true like enterpriser, is just the fact that some people liked his music. I have a cousin that's a DJ, love Nipsey's music. I have a cousin that she loves his relationship with his girlfriend, Lauren London. Like he just treats her so well. He's raising the kids. It just looks like they're so happy, right? And then I have another cousin that runs a multi-million-dollar business. And he's like, I love his mind, right? So all of these people were coming to me like, hey, listen to this guy. He kind of reminds me of you, or he'll get you hyped up for the game. And that's how I kind of connected with him. I think it was back in maybe 2011, 2012 on that Bullets with No Name like trilogy that happened. And since then I've been hooked.
I think that what you just described, somebody who can impact different people in different ways, is a great way for us to kind of strive to grow as people, whether it be as advisors, business owners, or just men in general. That our impact is attractive to different people for different reasons. And I think that, I don't know if that's something that you can intentionally do, if it's something that can be taught. I just think that for some people that just naturally happens. And not to give you a big head, but I would see that that'd be a quality that will take with you.
Thank you, man.
I think that just what speaks so much to him, like there's going to be a segment of the population that's going to focus on his history, and they're going to focus on the lyrics about kind of what he talked about. But even if you look at the progression of his career, the lyrics became more positive and like less degrading to women and things of sort as he got older and kind of wised up. Probably when he met Lauren and had a baby and everything. But if you look at after he passed away, he united the Bloods and the Crips, rival gangs. And he did that even in his career. There's the video and the song with YG, where it's half the screen is blue, half the screen is red. They're going back and forth. So you've got that, but the Bloods and Crips came together to celebrate his life. And then I'll never forget, somebody on Twitter highlighted that I don't know if it's the chief of police of the LAPD or somebody high up in LAPD who historically has not had a good relationship with people in Nipsey's community, said that he had to do a double take when he saw the name come across the line of who had been shot and killed, because he knew the good that Nipsey was doing. So I don't know what's more impressive, to get the Bloods and Crips together or to get the leader of the LAPD to respect you in an area that is not, have a good relationship with the police. I think that speaks volumes to the man that he was, above and beyond the artist that you and I love. And I think that the man that he was is why you and I are so attracted to him. Yeah.
And I think that he made that decision very early, right? So Nipsey's history, first of all, I want to say that everybody has a past, right? And I think that the beautiful part about Nipsey is that he didn't hide that past, right? A lot of times we want our YouTube videos to be the most glitzy, the most glamorous, and just show us in the perfect light. And I think that I really respected the fact that he showed us the bad or the past, right? And he showed us how bright his future was going to be. And I think that's dynamic, and people respected that.
And you think about the impact on the community from that. Like, his background is what a lot of people in that community are living. So like, again, I don't come from that. So that impact on me is not as great as it might be. But to give a young man in South Central LA a role model that, hey, I was doing all of that bad stuff. You don't have to do it, and you can be successful, and you can do these things and follow your passion. Like, I think that that's huge. And I think that's the biggest I think that's the saddest, well, that's not the saddest things, but I think that's one of the greatest loss aside from his life is just that you took somebody that was so valuable in that community and gave such promise to the youth and even people that are older trying to get out of there. And it was crumbled
Right.
and it was taken away.
Yeah.
So that unfortunately, I think the message could become if people like us don't continue to tell his story, the message could become no matter what, if you're here, you're stuck. And that's, for me as an outsider, to me, that's very scary to think that people are going to think that, you know what, Nipsey did all this good and he was heading down the right path and he still couldn't get out. And that's something that I hope all of this legacy and the things that he did and the articles that are written in the podcast and the ones that will come in the future and his legacy, I hope that legacy is continued to be put out in front of that community so that more people, so the people don't forget about what he did and don't lose that hope.
I shared a tweet with you this morning that was from Nipsey, and it said, the highest human act is to inspire, right? Some people will focus on the past, right? But I think that in his death, more Nipseys will be born due to his death, right? So I think that, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to listen to Victory Lap. They're going to go back and listen to that catalog as they have been, as we mentioned, that his album was #2 on Billboard Top 100 just a couple weeks ago because of his death. And unfortunately it happened, but I don't think that his legacy and what he was preaching is going to go in vain. I think more Nipseys are going to be born. I think there's going to be a slew of entrepreneurs that come out of this tragedy. I think people are going to think about their finance different, their wellness different. And I think that we're going to see a shift in that community in LA.
And hopefully, and not selfishly for my podcast, but hopefully those people that find Nipsey and find that story, find this podcast, and then maybe we can help focus that thought on, here are some principles to take from Nipsey to start your own legacy and start your own business and go down that path. You said if Nipsey impacts one person, if you and I can impact one person off this podcast, then this podcast and every episode that follows will be a massive success.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure we will. This is an awesome podcast. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I lean on you for advice. And I think that if we can share Nipsey's legacy, his lyrics, and just what he's done to impact, teach, and motivate others, I think that, it served its purpose.
So any closing thoughts on hip hop and business and entrepreneurship or Nipsey, or do you think we hit it all?
I think we hit it all, but I think that the thing that I like about Nipsey the most is that he really stuck to this quote that I like. And it says that, seek out what you want from the universe and watch it stand aside to let you have it, right? And I think that that's what he did. He decided early on that he was going to be not only a musician, not only a artist, but a philanthropist and somebody who you can look up to. And I think that he was unwavering about that, and it happened. So for any entrepreneur that's listening to this podcast, you have to be crystal clear about what it is that you want out of your business, what it is that you want out of your life, and be unapologetic about that thing. And I promise you that the universe will stand aside to let you have it.
And I'm not going to add anything to that because I think you summed it up perfectly. I want to thank you for being one of my first guests on the new podcast.
Thank you.
I also want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about hip hop and business and entrepreneurship, because that's something that's a few of my loves that I get to intertwine. And finally, one more thank you. I want to thank you for being willing to do something different when it comes to content creation and co-brand this thing. So you're going to be able to listen to this podcast on the Young Money podcast. You're also going to be able to listen to it on the Entrepreneurship Blueprint as well. So I think it's pretty cool that, from a high level, two competitors, getting together to create content together, and then we're each going to run it through our channels to get it in front of as many people as possible. So thanks for being willing to do that with me and co-brand it with me.
Thanks a lot, Justin. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe. Also check out all of Dasarte stuff. I'll have links to the show notes because that's what us podcasters do. So you can find his website, his book, his podcast as well, and you've got another book coming out soon too. So when that comes out, I'm gonna tease that. I didn't ask you if I could, but I'm teasing it. So now you have to do it. We'll be promoting that as well. So thanks for listening. Spread this around. Feedback is welcome. You can hit me up on Twitter at Justin Castelli, JUS10 CASTELLI Castelli, and Dasarte. Where do they find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all the socials at DasarteYarnway.com. That's DASARTE, last name Yarnway, YARNWAY.
I'll have links to all those, but I wanted to make sure in this co-branding, we both shout out our own social media. So everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Thanks, Justin.